Disabilities, myths and facts. On Locust. Only the brave dare look upon the gray, upon the things which cannot be explained easily, upon the things which often engender mistake, upon the things whose cause cannot be understand, upon the things we must accept and live with, and therefore only the brave dare look upon different without flinching.
Introduction. We all have an idea of how people should act, and people with disabilities are the same way. Here are some myths and facts about disabilities.
Disabilities. Myth. The cause of most disabilities are known, but there's little known about how to help individuals overcome or compensate for their disability.
Fact. In most cases, the cause of disabilities are not known, although progress is being made in pinpointing why many disabilities occur. In fact, more is known about treatment of most disabilities than about their causes.
A disability is a handicap.
A disability, or fact. Disability is an inability to do something, the lack of a specific capacity. A handicap, on the other hand, is a disadvantage that is imposed on an individual.
Current trends and issues. Myth. People with disabilities are pleased with the media's portrayal, especially about their extraordinary achievement.
Fact. Some disability rights advocates are disturbed by what they believe are too frequent overly negative and overly positive portrayals in the media.
Multicultural and bilingual aspects. Myth. Disability is never linked to ethnicity.
Fact. Some disabilities are genetically linked and therefore more prevalent in some ethnic groups. One example of this is sickle cell disease.
Mental retardation. Myth. Mental retardation is defined by how a person scores on an IQ test.
Fact. The most commonly used definition specifies that in order for a person to be considered mentally retarded, they must have low intellectual functioning and low adaptive skills.
Myth. People with mental retardation should not be expected to work in the competitive job market.
Fact. More and more mentally retarded hold jobs in competitive employment. Many of these people are helped through supportive employment situations.
Learning disabilities. Myth. Math disabilities are relatively rare.
Fact. Math disabilities are second only to reading as an area of academic difficulty for students with learning disabilities.
Myth. Most children with learning disabilities outgrow their disability as adults.
Fact. Learning disabilities tend to endure into adulthood. Most individuals with learning disabilities who are successful must learn to cope with their problems and make extraordinary efforts to gain control of their lives.
AD&D and ADHD. Myth. ADHD is primarily the result of minimal brain injury.
Fact. In most cases of ADHD, there is no evidence of actual damage to the brain.
Myth. The social problems of students with ADHD are due to them not knowing how to interact socially.
Fact. Most people with ADHD know how to interact, but their problem with behavioral inhibition makes it difficult for them to implement socially appropriate behaviors.
Emotional and behavioral. Myth. Students with emotional or behavioral disorders are usually very bright.
Fact. Relatively few students with emotional or behavioral disorders have high intelligence. Most have below average IQs.
Myth. Most students with emotional or behavioral disorders need a permissive environment. They can feel accepted and can accept themselves for who they are.
Fact. Research shows that a firmly structured and highly predictable environment is of greatest benefit for most students.
Communication. Myth. There is not much overlap between language disorders and learning disabilities.
Fact. Problems with verbal skills such as listening, reading, writing, and speaking are often central features of learning disabilities.
Myth. People with learning disorders always have speech difficulties as well.
Fact. It is possible for a child to have good speech, yet not make any sense. Most children with language disorders as well.
Deaf and hard of hearing.
Myth. People who are deaf are unable to hear anything.
Fact. Most people who are deaf have some residual hearing.
Myth. American Sign Language, or ASL, is a loosely structured group of gestures.
Fact. ASL is actually a true language in its own right, with its own set of grammatical rules.
Myth. Speech reading, or lip reading, is relatively easy to learn and is used by a majority of people with hearing impairment.
Fact. Lip reading is extremely difficult to learn, and very few people who actually become proficient in speech reading.
Blindness and low vision.
Myth. People who are legally blind have no sight at all.
Fact. Only a small percentage of people who are legally blind have absolutely no vision.
Myth. Braille is not very useful for the vast majority of people who are blind, only to be tried as a last resort.
Fact. Very few people who are blind have learned Braille, primarily due to fear that using it is a sign of failure, and to a historical professional bias against it.
Autism spectrum.
Myth. People with autism spectrum disorders are mentally retarded and cannot be involved in higher education or professions.
Fact. People with autism spectrum disorders have the full range of intellectual capacity.
Physical and health impairments.
Myth. The more severe a person's physical disability, the lower on their intelligence.
Fact. A person can be severely physically disabled by cerebral palsy or another condition and still have a brilliant mind.
Myth. Physical disabilities shape people's personalities.
Fact. They can have a full range of personalities.
Myth. Cerebral palsy is a contagious disease.
Fact. It is not a disease. It is a non-progressive neurological injury.
This is where we got all of our information from. And we want to thank the textbook, Sense Edition of
Exceptional learners.
Exceptional Learners and Introduction to Special Education.